Hello, parents, educators, and nerdy D&D fans. You have found our new home for Area of Effect, a talk show where we discuss how tabletop role-playing games benefit the whole family. We're currently in process of shifting all our old but golden episodes over to this new channel by posting a new episode every weekday until we catch back up to our new episodes. We would love your help getting this new channel up and running with a follow, share, or review. And thanks for joining us on our quest to bring more adventurers to the table.
This episode is brought to you by Accenture. When your advertising operations fall out of sync, everything else follows. Spotify and Accenture are working together to reinvent the rhythm of ad sales, using automation, analytics, and smarter workflows to simplify campaign delivery and access better data across the business. The result? Less time spent on operations, more time connecting brands with the moments and fandoms that matter most. Learn more at accenture.com/Spotify.
The new LinkedIn Hiring Pro can't undo your last hire, the no-show. Who set you back because they didn't show up on day one, or day two, or ever again. And now your product launch is delayed because you're talking to alien abduction podcasters to track them down. But LinkedIn Hiring Pro can help make sure your next hire sticks. In fact, businesses who use LinkedIn are 24% less likely to reopen a role in the next 12 months. Hire right the first time with LinkedIn Hiring Pro. Post a free job today at linkedin.com/quality.
A couple semesters ago, I was hosting a D&D game, therapy game at USF, and I had 4 players at the table, and one of the players was a graduate student. He's getting his PhD in math, which is leaps and bounds, beyond anything I know anything about other than 2 + 2 usually equals 4. And I had to roll for, I think, 3 different NPCs at once, and I rolled 3 D20s. 2 of them landed as 20s, natural 20s, and then 1 didn't. And I looked at them and I said, the group, and I said, wow, 2 of these were D20s. And this math PhD fella looked at me without thinking. He didn't blink or anything and said, that's a 1 in 400 chance. And I just was like, I am sure it is. I have no idea. I wouldn't have ever known that. And I thought I should have played the lottery or something that day.
Well, welcome to Area of Effect, a podcast by the Kids Table, where we discuss how tabletop RPGs benefit kids and answer your questions about playing TTRPGs with the kids at your own table. So today, I want to welcome Rachel with us. Hi, Rachel.
Hi, good morning.
Rachel is a licensed mental health counselor serving with USF, University of South Florida, and with her own private practice, Ready for Anything Counseling. She has been serving in these positions for over 8 years, providing mental health counseling, therapy, and career counseling. Rachel is passionate about mental wellness and empowering her clients to enact positive change in their own lives. And most interesting, I met Rachel actually at a session at a con recently where she was sharing how she incorporates Dungeons and Dragons into her own therapy. So I thought everybody listening would be super interested in learning more about that work today. So thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me. I really appreciate it.
Of course. So I thought we would just get started, backing up. What experience inspired you to start incorporating D&D or other TTRPGs into your therapy sessions?
Sure. Yeah, great question. It was really my own experience with D&D. I think like many people recently, I started playing during the pandemic. I've played virtually, and I learned what it was. I've really enjoyed playing video games for much of my adult life, and I really enjoyed those role-playing opportunities. And so D&D really opened that up even more so. I had no idea. And I was able to sit with a bunch of people, and it really allowed me to do some personal growth and in a few different areas related to my identity, and just explore some things certainly during that time. And as I started to do more clinical work, I realized, wow, this really has a benefit to helping people, if you will, flesh themselves out, and learn about themselves, and even practice some skills or learn who they are, or why it is that they engage with certain personalities in this way. And I thought, this would be really interesting to bring into a clinical setting.
So what was that like when you kind of first suggested that either to your clients or your coworkers or however you kind of proposed this?
Yeah, it's funny because USF really it was actually not where I was working through a lot of the pandemic. And so when I interviewed for them, one of the questions that they asked me was, well, what is it that you could bring to the center? What's something that you're really passionate about? And I talked about my identity as a nerd and as a gamer, and I talked about how D&D helped me with my own work and some of the experiences that I had with other people who had experienced that growth. I had done some research on it, and they said, "Wow, we love that." They had actually had a clinician who had done it there before, and so after starting with them, luckily the interview went well. And after starting with them, I think it was about a year into working there, I was able to launch the group, and it's gone really well. It's been received really well. I've been able to do a variety of outreach programming to promote it and talk about the importance of it. And it's been really well received since doing it at USF.
So, do you lead D&D only in like group therapy settings, or do you ever do it like one-on-one or just with maybe two?
Sure. So, it is a lot of the research behind it has really been in a group setting, typically three or more. And three is really the standard for any sort of group within the therapy and psychological services sphere. And so, I have not done it very often in an individual setting. However, I have encouraged students, if they have shared that they are interested in D&D, to talk about their characters that they've created, impacts that they've experienced as a result of playing those characters, sort of the why behind those characters are the way they are, and see if that has any impacts on what we're working on together in the therapy session. So most of the D&D stuff comes in a group format, but that doesn't mean that pieces of someone's D&D experience can't come up in an individual setting.
So, kind of a follow-up question. I'm wondering, why do you think that D&D or similar TTRPGs are kind of uniquely suited for the therapy setting compared to any other games? I'm sure there's other games that are used in therapy too, but what does D&D have that kind of uniquely makes it more effective?
Sure, I think the role-playing aspect comes to mind. A lot of people, because of some of the stigma that still exists around therapy, people don't necessarily know what happens in a therapy session. But role-playing is used in the therapy session, regardless of if there's fantasy involved or not. And so because it's already something that we're utilizing, it becomes really easy to fold in role playing in a D&D space into skill building, into identity growth, into socializing, into decision making, into all these different aspects that we may sit and talk about, but there's something really powerful about doing. And so that's really the key piece. If you distill it down to the similarities between therapy and D&D, it's the ability to just practice these skills in a safe space.
Now, how do you adapt like traditional D&D content to fit a therapeutic purpose? Do you have to change it a lot or just a little? What are kind of the key elements you look for to make it suited for therapy?
There's two things that come to mind. So I think that if individuals are interested and these can be accessed, you can find scientific studies that have been done about D&D and therapy, and some people utilize Wizards of the Coast produced content. I'm thinking of I'm running recreationally, like the Lost Mines of Phandelver. You could probably utilize that in the therapy space. I don't know if I would change that much, but I do think that what I would do is, as the DM, as a therapeutic DM, I would be more conscientious about how to just make sure that each encounter is promoting what it is that my clients are trying to do. So clients will identify a goal for being in D&D therapy, and then I will do my best to make sure that I'm facilitating a gaming space where that's happening. I tend to actually use a kit that was created by other therapeutic nerds to play D&D, and so the campaigns and the content are actually based around 9 different functional capacities to help build skills. I fully admit to you, I don't have those functional capacities memorized, but they are things like socializing, decision making, timeliness, just all different types of skills that can be built into a D&D campaign.
That's great. That's a lot to keep in mind as a DM, how each of your individual players are not just playing a character, you're not just telling the story, but you're also trying to help them achieve their individual goals. That sounds like a whole new level of DMing.
It can be really motivating and awesome to watch my clients hit those goals. And one of the nice things about working at USF is that I have the opportunity to work with clients who I see individually in my group. So I can see them process through group and hit those milestones and hit those goals, and then reconnect with them individually and talk with them about the progress that they've made.
Oh, that's so cool. So you'll notice as a DM like a special moment that they're having and, because of confidentiality, not pointed out at the table, but then you get another opportunity later to kind of really unpack it and pull it apart for how that applies to their goals and their real life experiences.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And I wanted to actually comment on that piece about the confidentiality. So one of the pieces that clients will understand of the group space is that they are allowed to bring things outside of D&D to that group space, and it remains confidential. I usually offer time both at the beginning and at the end of a group's therapy session to talk about things that might exist outside of the game, because they're still humans who experience things, and if the only type of therapy they're getting is D&D therapy, I want to make sure they have the opportunity to talk about things that don't just exist in game.
I wanted to point out a term that you used earlier that our audience might not be familiar with. You called yourself a therapeutic GM. Can you explain what that is and how it's different from a regular GM or DM?
Sure. So obviously the key word there would be therapeutic. Because I'm a licensed mental health counselor, when I'm engaging in D&D in a therapy space, I'm going to be looking at it through a therapy lens. So it's going to be different than when you're playing at home, because when we're DMing recreationally, we're not thinking about the therapeutic aspects of a game. We're not thinking about what might be occurring for the players at our table outside of the normal things that we're worried about, house rules, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the main difference. There are avenues that people can take to become certified as a therapeutic GM. I don't have any of those certifications, but because I'm engaging in D&D in a therapy space, I always like to add that at the beginning, just to make sure that I'm being conscientious of the fact that, yes, I'm playing D&D, but the therapy comes first.
That's great. So I'm wondering, for most of our audience who are DMs listening but are not licensed therapists, how can they maybe adapt the way they write or lead their games with their players to better support the therapeutic potential experience of D&D for their players? And when should they refer their players to seek some additional professional support when it kind of has maybe escalated beyond a level that they're able to address as a non-licensed person just leading D&D?
That's a great question. I honestly would be cautious to even bring a therapeutic mindset into a recreational game. I think that it's important for me to gatekeep in that way, because there's a difference. Just like I'm going to use a pretty standard example. When we go to like the nail salon or get our hair done, or, if we go to a restaurant and we start talking to our waiter or our hairdresser, we may start to divulge information about ourselves that feels helpful. We're venting. That's different than being in a therapy session. And so similarly, that's why I made the differentiation before between, we want to be conscientious of if recreationally one of our players seems distressed, or there's a theme maybe that comes up that we want to address with our group, that is still going to be different than what I'm doing in a therapeutic session. And so if as a recreational DM, you're noticing that people you're playing with are being impacted by a similar theme over and over again, or they're starting to lash out at your other players, or there's something, problematic that comes up, that might be an appropriate reason to encourage someone seek help, whether it's therapeutic D&D or not. Just like you would do that normally. If you're talking with a friend and you're starting to hear something concerning, you may say, hey, I'm really happy to sit here and vent with you, but it sounds like this might be a bigger issue than just needing to vent with your friends. I'm really going to encourage that you seek some professional help. If people really are benefiting from engaging in D&D, they could seek out a therapist who provides therapeutic D&D. But certainly if you're noticing that one of your players is engaging in the D&D space in a way that feels problematic, they don't have to find D&D in the therapy space either.
So then for the majority of our audience who are not licensed therapists, why should this matter to them and when they're just playing home games of D&D?
Yeah, so I think what I really strive to communicate is that therapy is often seen as one thing, right? It's usually seen as, oh, something's wrong with me and I need to go to therapy because there's something wrong with me. And the reason why I like to promote therapy in the D&D space, excuse me, D&D in the therapy space is because it's fun and it's a fun way to work on something that isn't necessarily a problem. It's just a skill that we want to build or become more comfortable with or learn more about ourselves. And so if you're sitting at home and you're playing with your kids or you're playing with your spouse or your friends and they start to confide in you in something and you could think to yourself, hey, that sounds like a really unique opportunity for you to expand your skills, in a therapy setting. It can be fun whether D&D is there or not. But yeah, at least you know in the back of your mind, well, someone's out there playing D&D and they're doing therapy work. So why not give, someone who already enjoys D&D the opportunity to go and find that elsewhere?
I'm curious if you have ever kind of incorporated into D&D outside of your therapy work, especially perhaps with children, your own children or others, using D&D to help kids or other players develop things like emotional intelligence, resilience, coping skills, things like that, that are a form of development that's not to the level of therapy, but still something that's beneficial to the individual's development. What do you think about that?
Sure, yeah. And, I can answer both as someone who's a recreational DM and a therapeutic, GM. So I think a lot of the science behind the importance of D&D and therapy talks about all of those things. And so that's why it's beneficial to do it. But I think just being able to work, I'm thinking of kids specifically. So being able to like use really characterize NPCs to try and get them to respond in ways that might be more empathetic or challenge them to correct a behavior. My son's only 2, so I'm not playing D&D with him yet. But, when I think about him, if he kind of yells back at me in a way that's really mean, I think about, well, how could I work this into a D&D setting where I can kind of give it back to him, where it's not me giving it back to him, but it's somebody else, so he can learn that this isn't fun to be spoken to that way. And then he can try and work in the moment. Well, how can I actually maybe change the way that I'm talking so that I can get a favorable response? So that's kind of the first thing that comes to mind. And even though right now we're talking about kids, something that's simple that you and I both know as adults, that can be expanded across the table from people who are kids to students in college to, people in middle age who need to work on communication skills.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, that's why we created the kids table to help. There's so many amazing benefits of tabletop role-playing games for kids. Things like communication, collaboration, critical thinking skills, creativity. I mean, the list really goes on and on. So we just really want to encourage and equip parents and other significant adults to bring kids to the table. And the fact is, a lot of the content that has been out there historically is not appropriate for children. So we're trying to share more content, both like videos of actual play campaigns and resources that families can download and use at home with their kids that are developed with kids in mind, age appropriate, and still hit all those targets that D&D can.
Yeah, I think that's great. I know that the kit that I use, even though it is, therapy driven, is made for kids. And so I I would be careful in terms of like buying it and using it recreationally because it is designed for the therapy space. But I think that's really motivating to hear that there's people out there who are trying to make more, you know, kid-driven D&D content because I think that there's such value in kids playing, whether therapeutically or not, because it's naturally a skill building role playing opportunity. It gives people the opportunity to do things maybe differently than how they would do it, whether they share that or not, or whether they share or not. I want to create this character that's very similar to me so I can explore doing things as me without it being me.
Yeah.
And so I think giving kids the opportunity to do that is way more important than we realize, even those of us in the D&D space.
So I'm curious, like backing up a little bit to when you were talking about kind of starting to incorporate D&D in your therapy work, Do you have any stories of how your clients, both those who had already played D&D or who are inexperienced with D&D, have kind of responded to this suggestion when you make it, or maybe how your coworkers or fellow professionals have responded?
Sure, I can answer kind of across the board. So I've had a few different really fun experiences at USF specifically where students have come up to me at different outreach events, or even my colleagues will come back and tell me that this happens. And they'll see on our group flyer that we have a D&D group, or they'll say, I've heard you have a D&D group and how do I do that? How do I get involved? And so that's been really meaningful and motivating to hear that people are specifically seeking our services out to engage in the D&D therapy group. So that's always really nice. When I mention it to people, to clients that I have, or when I have colleagues who will offer it to their students, it's usually well received. People usually know what it is and have some sort of interest in engaging. Maybe even more meaningful for me has been the opportunity to broaden other professionals' horizons. Back in June, I had the opportunity to go to a national conference on outreach services in college counseling centers. And I did a presentation where I talked about this very thing, and utilized the research to back up, well, why this is important, why it's impactful, and really seeing people in there who I don't think had any idea that it was even a thing, just sort of seeing them become more curious and buy into it. And I've had people respond in their feedback saying, I really want to bring this to my counseling center, has been really meaningful as well. Because it's really non-traditional in terms of therapy. And it's really meaningful that people are willing to become more abstract and more creative with the way that they encourage other people to engage in therapy services.
Do you think that perhaps suggesting therapeutic D&D as an option as opposed to more traditional kind of conversation-based, I guess I would say, therapy might have like a lower buy-in threshold and encourage more people to be open to the idea of therapy compared to the traditional format?
Yes and no. I think it depends on the person. I also think that sometimes people want to separate their hobbies from therapy. And so I think it kind of just depends. I've had some hit or miss moments. I've had clients who really like D&D that I've said, "Hey, are you interested in D&D group?" And they say, "Absolutely not." And I'm really surprised by that. But I think overall, the more variety that there is in the therapy space to help people access that higher level of self, help them feel like that they are being treated for, the variety of things that people come into therapy for, is the key. And so if it gets one extra person in the door, getting that help, getting that assistance that they need, that's what matters. And I think anything that can help, destigmatize what therapy is helpful. And if that means going to talk therapy for some people, great. If that means engaging in D&D therapy, great. If that means engaging in art therapy, etc., great. And so I want the answer to your question to be yes, but I think the answer is more of, if it's helpful for some, cool. And if it's not, that's also okay, because that's the beauty of therapy, is that it's not the same for every person. Yes, we have ethics and we have different, education that we follow, but it is a different experience for every single person all the time. And that's what I just love about therapy.
Well, I just before closing out, I wanted to share something. I've worked with like for 15 years with youth in middle school and high school, and I share this very often with my students when I'm talking with them, that by the time students are in high school, I'm aware that at least a quarter of them have participated in some type of therapy. And I share that information very frequently because I think it feels like it's a lonely, isolating, like this is just me experience, or sometimes there's like feelings of failure or shame wrapped up in it, kind of how you were sharing before, that it feels like admitting failure, but it's not. It's just that there's this stigma that it's kind of a private thing that people don't want to share, whereas so many more people out there that I promise, are participating in therapy, benefiting from therapy. It's not a weird or unusual thing to experience. And I like to make that known so that people feel like it's a normal thing for them to use as part of their toolkit as they go through life. So I want to encourage listeners today, if you or someone else you think could benefit from therapy, D&D based or otherwise, I really encourage you to look into that. And I know that there are lots of options if finances are a concern related to therapy. So check that out.
Thanks for listening to Area of Effect. Be a part of the ongoing conversation. Follow us on Instagram at the Kids Table D&D, where you can DM us questions that might appear on a future show. And check out the Kids Table D&D on YouTube to see how we include kids and teens at the table. Brought to you by the Kids Table, because when kids are at the table, everyone wins.